The memory of that day is still tied to the aroma of dread that had permeated my being. It was a sharp, smoky scent, like a fire extinguished by rain, that no amount of soap and water could wash away. The grand selection was imminent, and as the other Omegas drifted through the time-worn corridors of the pack-house with optimism gleaming in their gazes, I sought the dim corners, letting my light blonde hair curtain my face. The ritual had been the same for generations. On the night of the fullest autumn moon, every unmated Omega was to convene in the hallowed grove. There, under stars that seemed to murmur tales from the dawn of creation, the Alphas would arrive to select their mates. It was deemed the greatest privilege, a direct gift from the moon goddess to be selected, a privilege for all but me. "Alera, you can't stay sequestered in the kitchens indefinitely," Myra admonished, her tone both soft and insistent as she discovered me attacking a mound of bread dough with far more vigor than necessary. While the other Omega girls had passed the day anointing themselves with floral waters and weaving blossoms into their hair, I had taken shelter in labor, in the steady, reassuring cadence of making something practical with my own hands. "I'm not sequestered," I fibbed, though the untruth was plain to us both. "Someone needs to ensure the feast is prepared for after the ceremony." Myra's eyes filled with a familiar pity, an expression I'd come to expect over the years. "The selection is more than a custom, Allie. It provides security. You are aware of the fate of unchosen Omegas." I was. They were dispatched to the border territories, destined to live out their lives in service to, but apart from, the pack. Not precisely pariahs, but never fully integrated, the once time forgot. My fingers drifted to the small charm I wore, a plain silver circle engraved with the lunar cycle. It was the last thing my mother had given me before her death, pressed into my small hand with a faint tremor as she whispered, "Remember, my little star, in the deepest dark, the moon is never truly gone." For years I had held on to those words, to the cool touch of the metal that seemed to hum with her final assurance. But tonight, with the pack poised for festivity, that assurance felt fragile. "You are 23, Alera," Myra pressed, drawing me from my thoughts. "This is your final selection. I beg you, at least make an effort." The raw entreaty in her voice made me look up. Myra had been my mother's dearest friend and had cared for me since she was gone. The concern carved into the lines of her face was genuine. "What is the use?" I whispered, pushing the dough away. "We both know the outcome for flawed Omegas like me." It was the truth that was never uttered. While other Omegas could sense their fated mates, could feel the magnetic pull toward their destined Alpha, I experienced an absence. No pull, no yearning, no inner wolf crying out for its other half. Some said my wolf was too frail, others that I was hexed. Most just averted their eyes. "You are not flawed," Myra hissed, her hands closing over my flour-dusted ones. "You are unique. Exceptional." I nearly scoffed. Exceptional, as if my inability to fully transform into my wolf was an achievement, as if being the only Omega in living memory, devoid of the instinct that drew others to their intended alphas, was a blessing rather than a curse. Before I could form a reply, the heavy kitchen door swung inward, revealing Celine. Golden-haired, flawless Celine, whose smile could disarm the most hardened warrior, and whose Omega scent was rumored to make alphas lose their senses. "There you are," she chirped, her voice a light, melodic thing. "The rites are about to start, and you're still covered in... Is that flour?" Her perfect nose crinkled. "I was helping," I mumbled, suddenly self-conscious of my plain wool dress and untidy hair. Celine smiled, a gesture that did not warm her eyes. "Well, you need to hurry. The alphas are assembling, and the king's entourage has just arrived." My heart gave a painful thud. The king... King Theron sent envoys? Even Myra seemed taken aback. The Alpha King was sovereign over all packs in the northern ranges, a figure of such immense power and legend that most wolves lived their entire lives without ever seeing him. The tales about King Theron were endless, that he was centuries old, that he had slain his own twin for the crown, that a sorceress had hexed him to never find his true mate. Selene preened, relishing her role as the purveyor of such a monumental piece of news. Not just envoys, the king himself is attending. The floor seemed to drop away from me. In 250 years, no Alpha King had ever graced a selection ceremony for a minor pack like ours. "But for what reason?" Myra asked, articulating the question stuck in my throat. Celine shrugged, a gesture of elegant nonchalance. "No one knows, but the gossip is he seeks something or someone." Her gaze brushed over me and then darted away, as if the notion he could be looking for someone like me was too ridiculous to contemplate. And it was. I knew that. Still, a cold, heavy feeling settled deep in my stomach. "I should go," I murmured, making a useless attempt to brush the flour from my dress. "Yes, you should," Selene concurred, a little too eagerly. "The purification rite begins at twilight." As I moved past her, she grasped my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Alera," she said, her voice dropping into a serious register. "They also say the king has been altered, that he is not as he once was. Be wary." Before I could ask for clarification, she had turned her back, leaving me with the disquieting premonition that tonight would not adhere to the familiar script of disappointment I had braced myself for. The sacred thermal springs sent up clouds of steam in the fading light, the mineral-infused waters glowing an otherworldly turquoise against the encroaching forest shadows. Dozens of Omega girls performed the purification rituals, their anxious laughter skipping across the water's surface as they readied themselves for the selection. I waited on the periphery, slipping into the pool only after most had departed. The water's heat was a comforting embrace. The springs were believed to amplify our natural sense, to make us more alluring to the alphas. For me, it was just a quiet interlude before the certain rejection. "Do you suppose he'll be handsome?" A young Omega named Lyra whispered to her friend nearby. "The king, I mean. I heard he hasn't appeared in public for nearly a decade," her friend replied. "Not since the hex was cast." I sank lower, feigning deafness. "What hex?" Lyra asked, her voice hushed. "They say that after his brother's treason, something inside him shattered, that he became more beast than man. That is why he needs a mate so urgently, to break the hex before it consumes him entirely." A tremor went through me that had nothing to do with the evening chill. Legends and hexes were commonplace in our world, but this story resonated with a fragment of a tale my mother once told me, about a king whose heart had been turned to granite. "Your thoughts are too loud," a voice said beside me, yanking me from my reverie. I turned to see an older woman I did not know lowering herself into the water. Her hair was the color of moonlight, and her eyes were a strange amber that seemed to burn in the twilight. She was not of our pack. I would have known someone with such a commanding presence. "I apologize," I said, though I wasn't sure for what. The woman smiled, a startling expression that transformed her stern face into something almost gentle. "No need, child. The turbulent minds of the overlooked are often the most compelling." My breath hitched. "How did you—" "No." She let out a low chuckle, like stones shifting in a riverbed. "I have lived long enough to recognize the aura of one who feels they do not belong." I should have been insulted, but her words held no malice, only a simple declaration of fact that was more soothing than Myra's earnest reassurances. "They say the king is coming." I found myself confiding in this stranger. "Indeed," she replied, her unsettling amber eyes studying me. "He seeks that which was promised to him." "And what is that?" Her smile grew, showing teeth that seemed a fraction too sharp. "The one whose sorrow can dissolve granite." Before I could ask what that meant, a horn blared in the distance, 3 long solemn notes heralding the Alpha's arrival. Around us, the remaining Omegas hurried from the water, fumbling for robes and flowers, their movements a frantic dance of excitement and fear. "Your final selection," the silver-haired woman noted, making no effort to leave the pool. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "Then perhaps, Alera, you should be the one to choose this time," she said, using my name, though I had never spoken it. The surreal moment was shattered by Myra's voice, calling my name from the edge of the springs. When I glanced back, the mysterious woman was gone, leaving only faint ripples to prove she had ever been there. The hallowed grove was the heart of our territory, a circle of ancient oaks enclosing a clearing bathed in moonlight. Tonight torches flanked the path, their flames flickering in a breeze that smelled of damp earth and nervous anticipation. I walked at a deliberate pace, lagging behind the other Omegas in their white ceremonial gowns. Mine was borrowed from a cousin, a little loose at the shoulders and short at the hem, but it was clean, which was all that mattered for a ceremony I had no chance of completing. "Stay near me," Myra whispered as we neared the grove. She had no formal part in the proceedings, but had insisted on attending as my guardian. "Remember what I said." I nodded, though her advice, to stand straight, meet the Alpha's gazes, let my natural scent be known, had failed me 3 times before. Still, her presence was a comfort, as we passed under the gnarled oak archway marking the grove's entrance. Inside, the clearing was aglow with silver lanterns hanging from branches, casting a magical light on the assembled faces. Our pack formed a reverent circle, while in the center stood the unmated Alphas, powerful figures radiating an almost visible energy, and at the far end, on a throne hewn from a massive stump, sat a man who could only be the Alpha King. Even seated, he was a dominating presence, broader than any Alpha I had ever witnessed. With shoulders that tested the seams of his formal cloak, he was both magnificent and intimidating. His hair, dark as a starless night, fell in untamed waves, partially hiding a face that looked as though it were carved from stone. But it was his eyes that captured me. They were the color of glacial ice, so pale they seemed to glow in the silver light. Those eyes swept methodically over our group, evaluating each Omega with a cool, detached air. When they passed over me, a chill coursed down my spine, though whether from fear or something else, I could not say. "Welcome," intoned Elder Rowan, our pack's spiritual guide. "Tonight, under the grace of the full moon, we convene for the hallowed ritual of selection. May the goddess lead each Alpha to their fated mate, and may every union fortify our pack and bring joy to our hearts." The familiar words were a meaningless drone as I stood beside Myra, trying to shrink into myself. Around me, Omegas fidgeted, their sense sharpening as the ceremony commenced. One by one, Alphas stepped forward, moving among us with a predator's grace. Some recognized their mate at once, approaching with decisive steps. Others were more deliberate, circling, scenting the air, waiting for the spark of recognition. I watched as Lyra, the young Omega from the Springs, was claimed by a tall, red-haired Alpha. Her face lit up with pure joy as he offered his hand, the bond between them almost a tangible thing. Beside me, Myra squeezed my arm, but I could feel her hope dwindling as Alpha after Alpha went by without a single glance in my direction. It was unfolding exactly as it always had, just as I knew it would. My gaze drifted to the Alpha King, only to find him staring intently at me, his head cocked slightly as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. The force of his attention made my skin crawl, and I quickly looked down, my heart pounding. When I dared to look up again, he was speaking to a stern-faced Beta at his side, his expression unreadable. The Beta nodded and vanished into the shadows. The ceremony proceeded, the number of unclaimed Omegas shrinking until only a small group remained. Myself, Selena, and 3 others. Celine stood with serene confidence, her golden beauty attracting the attention of several Alphas who prowled around her. Then, as Elder Rowan was about to speak, a stir went through the crowd. The Beta who had left the king's side returned, flanked by 2 formidable warriors. Between them, they dragged a struggling man in a ragged, hooded cloak. "Your Majesty," the Beta announced, his voice sharp. "We found him on the edge of the territory, just as you foresaw." The king rose, and a hush fell over the grove. He moved with a startling grace for a man of his size, descending the steps to confront the captive. "Remove his hood," he commanded, his voice a low, rough sound as if scraped by ice. The guards complied, revealing a face that drew gasps from the onlookers. The man was handsome, but in a cruel, sharp-edged way. His features might have been noble if not for a scar that twisted his lip into a perpetual sneer, but it was his eyes that were the true shock, eyes of the same pale glacial ice as the king's. "Brother," the king said, the word heavy with centuries of sorrow. My hand flew to my pendant, the metal suddenly searing hot against my skin as the pieces of an old legend fell into place. The treason, the hex, the brother who had vied for the throne. Prince Valerius, the king's twin, his betrayer, smiled with the warmth of a blizzard. "Hello, Theron," he said. "I simply couldn't miss your latest humiliation." The king's face was a stone mask, but I felt the surge of his power, a raw, untamed alpha energy that washed over the grove, causing several Omegas to cry out and drop to their knees. I swayed but remained upright, held steady by some unknown force. "The ritual is not over," King Theron replied, his voice unnervingly calm. "It makes no difference," Prince Valerius laughed, "a sound like shattering ice. You know the sorceress's terms. Only the tears of true love, freely offered, can break your hex. And yet here you are, still parading omegas before you like livestock, still hoping one of them might actually desire the beast you have turned into." I didn't realize I had taken a step forward until Myra's hand closed on my arm. Something in the prince's taunts had ignited a fury within me, a protective instinct that made no sense. The king was the most powerful alpha alive. He needed no defense from me. Yet, as I looked at him, standing rigid and solitary, I saw past the fearsome king to the pain etched around his eyes, the isolation that cloaked him. Our gazes locked across the clearing, and in that instant something shifted, a recognition that had nothing to do with instinct or mating bonds, and everything to do with a shared understanding of what it meant to be unwanted. And for the first time my inner wolf stirred. I felt her awaken, a nascent flame inside my chest, this dormant part of me stirring from a long slumber. My wolf, frail and underdeveloped, strained against the confines of my consciousness, reaching for something or someone. The disturbance in the grove intensified as guards moved to surround Prince Valerius, their low growls a menacing counterpoint to the rustling leaves. Elder Rowan tried to restore order, his frail voice all but lost in the mounting chaos, while the other Omegas drew together, their fear a palpable scent in the air. All except Selene, who stood tall, her gaze fixed on the royal brothers with keen interest. Enough. King Theron's command sliced through the noise. He had not shouted, yet the single word possessed enough authority to quell every whisper, to halt every nervous gesture. Prince Valerius's smirk remained, though he ceased to struggle against his captors. Still the dignified monarch brother, how long until they all perceive what I do? The monster beneath the finery? I watched the king's hands clench into fists, and I felt a bizarre impulse to go to him, to cover his hands with mine, until the tension subsided. The urge was so alien, so at odds with my lifelong habit of remaining unseen, that I nearly gasped. "Take him away," the king ordered, his icy gaze unwavering. "We will address this intrusion after the ceremony is concluded." As the guards hauled the prince away, King Theron turned back to the assembly, his expression once more an unreadable mask. "My apologies for the interruption. Please, proceed." Elder Rowan cleared his throat, visibly unsettled but committed to tradition. "5 Omegas remain unclaimed," he announced, gesturing to our small huddle. "As is our way, each will approach the sacred fire and offer her prayer to the moon goddess." This was the part I feared the most, the public humiliation that followed being passed over. One by one we would step forward, declare our worthiness, and wait for a response that would never come. In my previous 3 ceremonies, I had stood before the fire in silence, unable to voice words that felt like lies. Selina went first, moving with fluid grace to the silver brazier where the sacred flames danced. Her voice was clear and musical as she spoke the ancient prayer. "By moon's grace and earth's power, I offer myself as mate and companion, as mother to the pack's future, as Omega to my Alpha. Goddess, guide me home." Several Alphas shifted, their interest palpable, but none came forward to claim her. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the onlookers. Selena, unchosen? It was unthinkable. One by one, the others followed, each reciting the prayer, each met with the same profound silence. When my turn came, Myra squeezed my hand and whispered, "Speak your truth, not just the old words." I walked toward the sacred fire on trembling legs, conscious of every eye on me, of the crushing weight of expectation and the certainty of failure. The fire's heat warmed my face as I stood before it, the traditional words evaporating from my mind, leaving only the truth I had never dared to say aloud. "I have no great promise to offer," I began, my voice a mere whisper. "I cannot be what an Omega is expected to be." A low murmur spread through the crowd. Elder Rowan frowned at my departure from the script, but something urged me on. "My wolf is quiet, our connection tenuous. I do not feel the certainty that others speak of, the instinct that shows them where they belong." I paused, my fingers finding my pendant, drawing a strange strength from its familiar shape. "But I know what it is to live in the shadows, to find value in being useful rather than wanted. I know how to endure the darkness, believing that the light will return." The words came not from rote memory, but from a deep well of truth within me. As I spoke, I felt my wolf stir again, pressing closer to the surface of my consciousness than ever before. I do not ask to be chosen from pity or duty. I ask only for a chance to belong somewhere, with someone who can see me for what I am, not flawed, not hexed, just different. My voice cracked and a single tear escaped, falling into the sacred fire with a soft sizzle. The flame suddenly erupted, leaping high with a burst of silver-blue light that drew gasps from the crowd. Then silence, a silence so absolute it seemed to have weight and texture. I kept my gaze fixed on the fire, unwilling to face the pity I knew awaited me. This was how it always ended. The sudden sense of a presence behind me was so startling I almost stumbled into the flames. A hand caught my elbow, large and warm, steadying me with surprising gentleness. "Look at me," a voice commanded, a voice that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate deep within my soul. Slowly I turned, already knowing who it would be. King Theron stood over me, his pale eyes no longer remote, but focused on my face with an unnerving intensity. This close I could see the fine lines of fatigue around them, the slight tremor in the hand that was not on my arm. "Your name," he said, the words a cross between a question and an order. "Alera," I whispered, suddenly aware of the complete stillness of the grove, of the hundreds of eyes fixed on this impossible scene. "Alera," he repeated, my name sounding transformed on his tongue, significant. "You wept." It was not what I had anticipated. My confusion must have been plain on my face, because his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Your tear," he clarified, gesturing to the fire, which still burned with an unusual silvery hue, "offered freely, without coercion." Understanding dawned slowly. The sorceress's hex, only the tears of true love freely given. But that couldn't be it. We were strangers. "I don't understand," I confessed, forgetting all protocol. A shadow of what might once have been a smile touched his lips. "Nor do I." Before I could process this, he turned to the assembled pack, his hand remaining on my elbow as if to anchor me. "The selection is concluded," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "I claim this Omega as my own." The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I heard Myra's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of leaves in the night wind, and then bedlam. Voices rose in a chorus of confusion and protest. Celine's was the loudest, her melodic tone now shrill with disbelief. "But she is flawed, she cannot even shift correctly." Elder Rowan stepped forward, his face grave. "Your Majesty, respectfully, the law is clear. An Omega must be able to fully embrace her wolf to be mated with an Alpha of your stature." The king's grip on my arm tightened, possessively. "You would instruct me on the law, Elder? I who have enforced it for 2.5 centuries." The old man blanched but did not back down. "The law protects both. A weak bond is a danger to both, and given your condition—" "My condition," King Theron interrupted, his voice a dangerous whisper, "is my affair." I should have been terrified. Instead I found myself studying the king's face, the tight clench of his jaw, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cool air. He was in pain, a constant grinding pain he concealed behind a mask of royalty. "You are in pain," I said quietly, the words for him alone. His eyes snapped to mine, surprise momentarily breaking through his control. "What did you say?" "You are hurting," I repeated, keeping my voice low. "I can see it." For a fraction of a second his mask slipped, revealing a vulnerability so raw it was almost painful to witness. Then it was gone. "Come," he said, ignoring the protests around us. "We are leaving." "But—" I glanced at Myra, who stood frozen, her face a storm of fear and astonishment. "You may bid her farewell," he conceded, releasing my arm but staying close. "Be quick." I walked toward Myra on legs that felt disconnected from my body. She grasped my hands, her eyes searching mine. "Alera, are you sure about this?" "I don't think I have a choice," I whispered. "There is always a choice," she insisted. "Even with a king." Was there? The thought of refusing, of retreating to my small, safe world of kitchens and shadows, suddenly felt impossible. Not because of his power, but because of the pain I had seen in him, a loneliness that mirrored my own. "I want to go," I said. the truth of it surprising even me. I don't know why, but I have to. Myra studied me, then nodded slowly. Your mother always said your destiny would be different. I do not think even she imagined this. She pressed a small cloth pouch into my hand, redolent of herbs. For protection, and to remember. I clutched it, fighting back tears. Thank you for everything. Be brave, little star, she whispered, using my mother's old endearment, and remember who you are. A shadow fell over us. The king. His patience was at an end. It is time. I tucked Myra's gift into a small pocket of my gown and turned to face him. He offered his arm, and I placed my hand upon it, feeling the immense, restrained strength beneath the fine wool. As he led me from the grove, past the stunned faces of my pack, I caught Celine's expression, no longer just surprised, but twisted with something darker, hatred perhaps, or a jealousy so fierce it bordered on madness. I looked away, focusing on the path ahead, on the king beside me, on the restless stirring of my wolf, more present than ever before. Beyond the grove a royal escort waited. The king guided me to the largest carriage, its black lacquer emblazoned with a silver crest. Your possessions? He asked. I almost laughed. I have nothing of value, I admitted. Only what Myra gave me, and... My hand went to my pendant. His gaze followed the motion. Your mother's? I nodded, surprised. Then it is of value, he said, a new softness in his voice. He handed me into the carriage. The interior was a world of velvet and polished wood, more luxurious than anything I had ever imagined. I perched on the edge of a seat, acutely aware of my simple dress and unadorned hair. What was I doing here? He entered after me, his large frame shrinking the spacious interior. As the carriage lurched forward, he stated, You have questions. A hysterical laugh welled in my chest. I had nothing but questions. Why me? I finally asked. His expression was unreadable. I do not know, he admitted, the honesty startling. But when you spoke, when you wept, something shifted. Something I have awaited for a very long time. The hex, I whispered. He tensed. What do you know of hexes, little Omega? The endearment, devoid of warmth, was a reminder of the chasm between us. Only stories, I said cautiously. And what your brother said about tears and true love. His jaw tightened. My brother speaks of things he does not comprehend. Then help me comprehend, I countered, a boldness I didn't know I possessed rising in me. If I am to be your mate, do I not deserve to know what that means? He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand, palm up. What do you feel, he asked quietly, when you touch me? I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. A jolt went through me, not the fabled mating bond, but something else, something that made my dormant wolf press closer, alert and eager. Warmth, I answered, and a sense of recognition, as if my wolf knows something I do not. He nodded. The hex is complicated. At its heart it is simple. I am becoming what my brother claims I already am, a monster, more beast than man. I studied his face, seeing the subtle signs now, the slightly elongated canines, the inhuman pale of his eyes. And you believe I can break it? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. Me? Who can barely connect with my own wolf? His thumb traced a circle on my palm. Perhaps that is precisely why it must be you, an Omega caught between worlds. Like him, I realized. He too was trapped between his human form and the monster he was becoming. What happens now? I asked, my voice a whisper over the rumble of the wheels. Now, he said, his hand still holding mine, we return to my palace, and we discover whether it was fate or mere chance that brought you to me. As the carriage carried us through the night, away from all I had ever known, my wolf stirred again, not with fear, but with a wild, strange hope that after a lifetime of not belonging, I had finally found my place, even if it was beside a cursed king who might at any moment become the monster he so feared. The journey to the royal palace spanned 3 days. 3 days of tense silence, of watching the familiar forests give way to the stark, rugged beauty of the northern mountains. I studied the Alpha King in stolen moments, cataloguing the flashes of pain that crossed his face, the way he would sometimes press a hand to his chest, as if containing a struggle within. Each night we stopped at fortified outposts, and each night I was given a separate chamber guarded by silent warriors. I would lie awake, listening to the king pacing in the adjacent room, his restlessness a palpable presence that seemed to bleed through the stone walls. By the third day, my own exhaustion mirrored his. When the palace finally emerged from the twilight mist, its formidable spires piercing the sky, I was overcome with relief. "It's beautiful," I murmured, the words escaping without thought. He glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You think so? Most find it cold." I looked again at the soaring towers of alabaster stone, the massive walls that captured the last rays of sun and turned them to gold. There was a severity to it, yes, but also a raw elegance that resonated with me. "It looks as if it grew from the mountain," I said, "as if it belongs here." A subtle change softened his expression. "You have a gift for seeing beneath the surface, Alera." The sound of my name in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through me. As we passed through the gates, I felt hundreds of eyes on us, the entire royal household watching. The carriage halted, and a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. She bowed to the king, then turned a sharp, appraising gaze on me. "Your Majesty, I see the selection was successful." The slight hesitation in her voice spoke volumes. "Lady Isolde," the king acknowledged, "this is Alera. She is to be given the royal chambers next to mine." Lady Isolde's eyebrows rose a fraction. "Of course, Your Majesty, they shall be made ready." She turned to me, her expression a careful blank. "Welcome to the Northern Palace, Omega Alera. I am Lady Isolde, the royal steward." I nodded awkwardly, unsure of the correct etiquette. "Thank you," I managed. Lady Isolde's lips thinned, but she simply gestured for me to follow her into the palace. The king was immediately swarmed by advisers, their voices urgent and low. I glanced back once, and his eyes met mine for a fleeting instant, a look I could not decipher before he was lost in the crowd. "The royal wing has been unoccupied for many years," Lady Isolde said as we walked through increasingly grand corridors. "The king has preferred solitude." Her careful phrasing told me more than a direct explanation could. He had isolated himself because of the hex. "These will be your chambers," she announced, stopping before a set of ornate doors. "They connect to the king's suite through a shared parlor, though that door has been locked for a very long time." She opened the doors to reveal a space so vast and opulent I could only stare. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating elegant furniture and a massive canopied bed. "This is for me?" I stammered. Lady Isolde's expression softened slightly. "These are the traditional quarters of the royal mate. They have not been occupied since the time of Queen Alara, over 2 centuries ago." I stepped inside, feeling like a trespasser. The air held a faint, lingering scent of flowers, as if the queen's presence had been preserved. "Queen Alara was the king's mother," Lady Isolde explained. "She perished in the northern wars before the incident with Prince Valerius." So many careful omissions. "Attendants will be with you shortly to help you prepare for dinner," she said, moving to the door. "The king expects you at the high table." Panic fluttered inside me. "Tonight? But I don't know the customs." "You will learn," she stated, her tone leaving no room for argument, "as all royal consorts have." I was not a consort, but I didn't correct her. "Lady Isolde," I asked, "why did he choose me?" She paused, her eyes seeming to hold centuries of secrets. "That," she said, "is a question only he can answer. But I will say this, in 250 years he has never brought another Omega to these chambers." With that she left, leaving me alone in the oppressive splendor. The attendants arrived, 3 Beta women who moved with quiet efficiency, preparing a bath and laying out a gown of deep midnight blue that seemed fit for a queen. "I can't wear this," I protested. "You are to sit beside the king," one of them, Mira, said gently. "Your appearance is a reflection on him." I relented. They bathed and dressed me, styling my hair until it shone. When I looked in the mirror, I hardly knew the elegant, composed woman staring back. "The pendant," I said suddenly, needing the familiar weight of it. Mira fastened it around my neck without a word. The dining hall was a cavernous space, its vaulted ceiling hung with massive chandeliers. The king was already at the high table on a raised dais. As I approached, the hall fell silent, all eyes on me. The king looked up, his pale gaze finding mine. A flicker of surprise, or perhaps approval, crossed his face before his usual mask of neutrality returned. He rose and extended his hand. "Alera," he said, his voice carrying in the hushed room, "you honor us." I placed my hand in his, feeling that now familiar jolt of recognition. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He seated me at his right, the position of highest honor. As the meal began, he murmured, for my ears only, "They are curious. It has been some time since I have shown an interest in any Omega." "And have you," I asked boldly, "shown an interest in me?" His eyes met mine, a flash of raw honesty in their depths. "I brought you here," he said simply. "I have brought no other." Before I could reply, a commotion erupted at the entrance. Guards moved into position as a familiar figure strode in, flanked by warriors who seemed unsure if they were his escort or his jailers. Prince Valerius, now dressed in finery that rivaled the king's, approached the high table. Beside me the king went rigid, tension radiating from him. "Brother," Valerius called out, his voice laced with mockery, "how rude not to invite me, especially when you are introducing your new pet to the court." A surge of the king's alpha power washed over the room, so intense that several servants dropped to their knees. My own wolf cowered, not from fear of the king, but for him. Without thinking, I placed my hand over his, where it gripped the table. "Breathe," I whispered, echoing my mother's old words. To my shock, he did. The oppressive energy receded. "Prince Valerius," the king acknowledged, his voice steady, "I was not aware you had been released." "Oh, please, Theron," Valerius laughed. "Did you really think those cells could hold me? Besides, I had to meet the latest candidate for breaking your hex." His gaze shifted to me, cold and amused. "Though I must say, your standards have slipped. At least the others had functional wolves." The words struck like a blow. Before the king could respond, Lady Isolde rose. "That is enough, Prince Valerius. You will show the king respect, or you will be returned to your cell. In chains, if need be." Valerius's smile never wavered. "Always the loyal servant, Isolde. Does my brother know what you did? What you helped the sorceress conceal?" Lady Isolde went pale. "You speak of things you do not comprehend." "Oh, I comprehend," Valerius countered, his gaze moving between her and the king. "I comprehend that my brother has brought another innocent here to save him. How many is that now, Theron? 8? 9? And when she fails, will you discard her as well? Or will this one end up like, 'Enough'?" The king's roar shook the hall. He stood abruptly. "Guards, confine my brother to the eastern wing. He is not to leave. Anyone who helps him will be executed." Valerius offered no resistance, bowing with exaggerated courtesy to the king and then to me. "Enjoy your stay in the Palace of Bones, little Omega," he said softly as he was led away. "Remember, every hex has a price, and it is never the guilty who pay it." The hall remained silent, all eyes on me. The king stood, his control fraying. "Continue the meal," he commanded the room. Then, to me, "Come with me." He led me at a rapid pace up a spiral staircase to a high stone balcony. The night air was freezing, the stars brilliant. He gripped the balustrade, dragging in deep breaths of the cold air. My wolf urged me toward him. "Your brother mentioned others," I said quietly, moving to his side. "How many Omegas have come here before me?" He was silent for a long moment. 8, he finally said, his voice rough. 8 Omegas over 2.5 centuries. And what happened to them? He turned to me, and in the moonlight the curse's subtle changes were more apparent. "They failed," he said, "or I failed them. The hex remained. They were sent home with enough wealth to live in comfort for the rest of their lives." "Then what did he mean?" I pressed. "About one ending up differently?" The king looked away. "That is a story for another time. Tonight, the full moon is rising. I need to know if what I sensed in you was real." He held out his hand. "Shift with me," he said. "Let me see your wolf." Fear seized me. This was the moment of truth. "I can't," I whispered, shame burning in my cheeks. "I have never been able to complete a full shift. My wolf, she is too weak." Instead of disgust, his expression softened. "Show me what you can do," he said gently. "I need to see, Alera." His use of my name gave me the courage. I closed my eyes, reaching inward for the elusive, shadowy part of myself. She was there, more present than ever, straining against the barriers that had always held her. "Let go," the king murmured. "Trust her." I had spent my life fighting for control. Now I surrendered it. Pain shot through me as the shift began, bones grinding, muscles tearing. I nearly pulled back, but the king's hand tightened on mine. "Stay with it," he commanded. "She is stronger than you know." I pushed through the pain, and my wolf surged forward. For the first time, our spirits aligned. The world exploded into a riot of color and scent. I dropped to all fours as my body transformed, fur sprouting, pores forming. It was agony, and it was ecstasy, and then it was done. I stood on the balcony in my wolf form, small with pale blonde fur, but completely, undeniably wolf. The king stared, his face filled with a wonder that erased his stern features. "I knew it," he breathed, dropping to one knee before me. I knew what I felt was real. I took a hesitant step toward him, then another, reveling in the fluid grace of my new form. I nudged his outstretched hand with my muzzle, inhaling his scent of pine and snow and wildness. "You are not broken, Alera," he said softly, his fingers stroking my fur. "You were never broken. Your wolf was waiting, for someone who could see her." Pure joy erupted in my chest. I threw back my head and howled, the sound clear and strong in the mountain night. And after a moment the Alpha King joined me, his deeper howl weaving with mine in perfect harmony. In that perfect moment there was no hex, no intrigue, no prince with cruel warnings. There was only the song of wolf to wolf, the ancient call that bound our kind. And in that song I heard the beginning of what might, one day, become love. The elation of my first complete shift waned with the rising sun, replaced by an ever-growing list of questions. The king retreated into his duties, spending long hours in council meetings or secluded in chambers I could not enter. When we met, at formal meals or chaperoned walks, he was polite but distant, as if the connection we had shared under the moon had been a dream. 2 weeks crawled by. I learned the ways of the palace under Lady Isolda's tutelage, court etiquette, political histories, the duties of a royal mate. Yet she never mentioned the Hex, the 8 Omegas who had come before me, or Prince Valerius's ominous words. The prince himself remained in the eastern wing, though I heard whispers of his frequent visitors, courtiers drawn to his dangerous charisma. In the 3rd week my restlessness drove me to explore the sitting room that connected my suite to the king's. Trailing my fingers along a bookshelf, I felt a section of paneling give way. Curiosity overriding my caution, I pushed. The panel slid aside, revealing a narrow door with an ornate silver lock. A memory surfaced, the strange woman at the springs, her amber eyes. My mother's final gift, the silver pendant, felt warm against my skin. I took it off, noticing for the first time that its edge was not smooth, but notched in a peculiar pattern. My heart pounding, I fit the pendant into the lock. It was a perfect key. The door opened onto a spiral staircase leading down into darkness. My wolf urged me forward. I lit a lamp and descended into the mountain's heart. The air grew cold, smelling of stone and an ancient power that called to me. The stairs ended in a circular chamber carved from rock. In the center a pool of water reflected my lamplight with unnatural clarity. Runes were carved into the stone floor around it, glowing with a faint silver light. "You should not be here." I spun around. The king stood in the doorway, his face a thundercloud of fury. "I am sorry," I began, though my wolf refused to submit. "I found the door and chose to disregard the lock?" he interrupted, his anger a palpable force. "To intrude upon the one place in this palace forbidden to all but me?" Strangely, I felt no fear, only a sense of rightness. "What is this place?" I asked. He hesitated, a war playing out on his features. "The heart of the Hex," he said at last, moving to the pool's edge. "Where it began, and where it must end." I joined him, gazing into the water. Our reflections wavered, and his face began to shift into something monstrous, a hybrid of man and beast. My own reflection dissolved into a silver mist. "This is what I will become," he said quietly. "The final stage of the Hex, neither man nor beast, a thing that will destroy all I have protected." "The tears of true love, freely given," I murmured, remembering Valerius's words. "They are meant to fall into this pool." The king nodded grimly. "So said the sorceress who cast the Hex. Only then will the transformation be stopped. And the other Omegas? A flicker of pain crossed his face. They tried, some for ambition, some from duty. One. He trailed off. One I thought might succeed. She was kind. She claimed to love me. What happened to her? I asked into the silence. She died, he whispered. Here. The pool rejected her tears, the magical backlash. It killed her. Horror washed over me. And you brought me here, knowing that could happen? He turned to me, his anguish raw. No. After Elise died, I swore never again. For 200 years I have fought this alone. I have felt myself slipping away with each passing moon. Then why me? I whispered. Why now? Because I am out of time, he admitted, his voice breaking. Because when you wept at the selection, for the first time in centuries, I felt hope, Alera. He framed my face with his hands. But I will not risk your life. Seeing you here, I realize how selfish I have been. I should have told you the truth. I covered his hands with my own. Tell me now, I said. And he did. He told me of the sorceress who had loved Prince Valerius, who had cursed the king after he banished his brother for treason. He told me of the slow, agonizing transformation, of the monster he feared he was becoming. The hex will be complete on the next blood moon, he finished, his voice hollow. In 3 days. I will be lost forever. Unless someone sheds tears of true love into the pool, I said. A risk I will not let you take, he said firmly. You will leave tomorrow. Return to your pack. I will provide for you. The thought of leaving was a physical pain. My wolf howled in protest. And if I refuse? I challenged. Hope fled in his eyes, quickly extinguished. You cannot love me, Alera. We barely know each other. I don't know if I love you, I admitted honestly. But my wolf recognized you from the very first moment. I know you helped me heal a part of myself I thought was broken forever, and I will not leave you to face this alone. I reached up, touching his face. Let me try, I whispered. Let me choose. For a long moment he stared at me, conflict and longing warring in his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. 3 days, he said. 3 days to see if what your wolf knows is enough. 3 days to fall in love. 3 days to save him. As we left the chamber, I felt the weight of my mother's pendant, the key that had led me to my destiny. I might not love the Alpha King yet, but I would fight for him. And in that fight, I would discover if our connection was strong enough to break a centuries-old hex, and if my tears, when they fell, would be those of true love, freely given. Nan, 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 nan.